Jacob. How
Hi,
are you?
hello
Welcome
Jacob.
to
Welcome to
the
our
Soap
fireside
Hub
chat.
Fireside Chat. It's good to see you again. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. How's everybody doing?
Awesome.
Awesome. I like your green hat.
Hey, it is St. Patty's Day. You got to throw some green out there.
We
You
got a
know,
lot of
hey,
green.
and everybody else seems to be have their green on too. You know, it's funny how many times I look in my closet and go, I don't have anything that's green. But nice to see all your smiling faces. So thanks so much for having me on.
Absolutely. I've been following your social media, and we've done a couple of stories on it at Soap Hub about Prepare for Launch, in which you play a real life astronaut. Can you talk about that project and how it came to be?
Sure. So John S. Bull was sort of an unsung hero. He was an astronaut on the Apollo missions, and he ended up did all the testing for what Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin and all those guys were going to do. They were going to walk on the moon, right? And he was tapped to go. Unfortunately, after all of the testing and all the science work that he did, because he was not only an Air Force pilot, he was also a scientist, and he was also an engineer, very smart engineer. And he ended up coming down with a pulmonary heart issue that ended up dashing the entire dream, right, of going to the moon. And so he walked away from the NASA program because he thought that was going to be the end game. But he ended up eventually coming back to NASA and was part of all that engineering that went into all the shuttle systems, and through the 70s, 80s to 90s, even until he retired the program, he was pretty much in there. So it was it's a really, really interesting story. And it's funny you mentioned that. Thanks, Michael. I reached out to an uncle of mine who works in the Gemini telescope in Hawaii. A lot of my family on my stepmom's side was all Boeing. They've been Boeing for years and years. So when this project was coming together, I reached out to him and I was like, hey, who do we know at NASA? I was like, I'm looking to try to put some favors together, because the movie I'm not only involved with as an actor, but I'm also producing on it. And next thing you know, I have this huge email chain. They're like, well, what are you looking for? And they wanted to find out about what the story was about. I started mentioning John Bull, and everybody was like, whoa, John Bull, he's our hero. So we knew we were definitely on the right track with this project. And ironically, I kind of look like the dude, so it sort of worked out.
Yeah, there's a resemblance. And can you talk about working with Amanda Baker in this, your All My Children Babe 2.0?
Yeah, and of course, and of course, working with Alexa, obviously, sorry, hold on one second, my internet for some reason.
Yeah.
And we're back. So Amanda Baker, obviously, I mean, I'm not partial to either one of the babes. They're both so exceptional, both those wonderful, Alexa, Amanda. But he was from Memphis, Tennessee. She's from South Carolina originally. So, it wasn't like a big stretch for her to play that real deep Southern. I wanted her rooted, and I wanted to have that, that strong Southern drawl. And I said, you ham it up as much as you want with this, because she's a fire cat, this woman. And I want somebody who's really powerful in this project. And she did such a fantastic job, really kicked some serious boutoir, if you know what I mean. And she's great. So yeah, we're very excited about it. Right now we're in some talks with this thing going, to some of the major platforms. And we've got a really exceptional cast that's attached to it at the moment. And so it's really cool.
I know you have there's always like a plan and a script as to where you're moving forward, but as you get more into a project, do you find that you become more passionate about it, more so than you might have thought you might have been, or more so than with other projects, just because once it takes on a life of its own, it just becomes so fulfilling?
Yeah, that's such a great question, Michael. Yes, it does. When you've invested the time, and in the beginning you go, oh, what is this I'm getting myself into? What is the project all about? What is the character? You know, does it make sense for me? But once you start seeing, you know, what's developing, you know, as far as cinematography wise, um, you know, quite honestly, I wasn't sure really what to expect. I just loved the project to begin with. And once it started coming together, I was like, wow, this is really something kind of unique and exceptional. And it just sort of took on a life of its own. And I just became more and more filled with the idea of what that meant and where it could possibly go. And now it really has, it's taken on a life of its own. It's really in a whole nother, I don't want to put any puns out there, but it's out in space.
Another stratosphere.
Yeah, totally.
That's awesome. Well, you're definitely going to have to keep us posted on future developments. We want to promote that as much as possible because it sounds like a real passion project for you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. It's really an exceptional project, and the team that I have supporting it um, from the ground up is they're just A plus plus, and it's well on its way. So very exciting. And then, you know, there are a lot of questions I think probably that come up, Michael, about, you know, like this, I see it every day. It comes up in my social media. It's like, why aren't you in soaps? Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you on all
Right.
my children? Why aren't you on Bold and the Beautiful? And I really needed to take just to answer that question. And I'm pretty sure that was probably going to be maybe one that you would, of course, ask me.
Absolutely.
Why am I not? But quite honestly, not that those mediums weren't fulfilling and really wonderful, but it became sort of repetitive for me artistically, and I needed something different in my life at this point. Becoming a father, you know, of 3 times, a dad, and just knowing that I wanted so much more artistically at this time in my life, and not, you know, sort of playing the same thing
Right.
even over and over again. And that was okay. I'm cool with that. I loved it. I loved it. I loved it. I loved working on with all my co-stars, but I really needed to sort of grab those producing um, handlebars and move in that direction for myself, just for my own artistic sake. So it's been really nice to be able to step out and sort of look at what I've been able to do in my life, and now be able to take a little more of a controlling interest in what that means for the next 50 years of my career.
Absolutely. And something else I'm following that you're heavily involved in is your Real Conversations with Jacob Young. They're awesome because you're such a great interviewer and you've got a great voice. And I can see you really listening to what your interview subjects are saying. They say that actors and reporters have in common that they both need to listen. And I forget who said it. And
Maybe you did just
maybe
now.
I did. I said yes just now. Yes, thank you. But can you talk about some of the guests you've had? I know you had Mary Wilson on, and it was so sad that we lost her so shortly after. And you talk about what you're hoping to do with that show.
Yeah. So, yeah. Well, thank you so much, first of all, for those kind words. And, you know, I've sort of always hated my own voice. You know, you listen to your voice, you go, oh, I sound like that. What? But a long time ago, I realized, you know, I, like a lot of people, like a lot of us, every single one of us, we go through hardships. We have to cross bridges that we don't want to ever have to go through, whether it's losing somebody or even identifying our own mental health. And the idea behind this was not only for the general public, but it was really for my own discovery. I wanted to make sure that I could accept the mental health struggles that I've gone through. And if I could accept my own mental struggles, then hopefully I could be an advocate to assist anybody else. So Real Conversations is a podcast series that is sponsored by, and I'm so grateful for, Boys Town, which has been around since, you know, the Great Depression, when Father Flanagan established Boys Town. It didn't mean just boys. It was just back then there was a lot of boys that were sent off to work because their families couldn't take care of them. They were 7, 8 years old. They're like, we just can't feed you. We can't, you know, the Dust Bowl, the whole thing was happening. And so they ended up, they would find their way because they heard from another kid or somebody else, and they'd find their way to Father Flanagan. And there was a famous movie, of course, an Oscar award-winning film with Mickey Rooney and Spencer Tracy,
Mm-hmm.
which was obviously won great awards, and Mickey Rooney was fantastic, and Spencer was great in it as well. But I'd seen it before, but I never knew it was a real place. I actually, when I first got in contact with Boys Town, I was like, is this the same Boys Town as the movie? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, no way. So that's a true story. And then I just became invigorated. So I've been working with them ever since. And so I told them, I said, look, I want to do this podcast and I want to help youngsters because I had a really hard upbringing.
Mm-hmm.
My life was not easy. And a lot of people's are not, but I didn't want to hide behind that veil anymore. I wanted to lift that veil of shame. I want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to know that it's okay to talk about our struggles with life and openly discuss it on a format. So yes, I've had some great guests on there. Yes, Mary Wilson. I was devastated when obviously when she was in great health. It was
Mm-hmm.
just a couple of weeks prior to that, and I also had her on a live reading that I was producing. It was called A Country Christmas Carol, which she was on there with a bunch of other actors and musicians, and it's based on a Christmas Carol, of course, of the traditional story, but about a country music guy, and she was on there, and she was exceptional. And we were talking about in the interview, of course, about her actually coming on to do this in the film version, 100% across the board. And she was like super excited, and it was just so sudden. So it's it was that, I've had all sorts of different guest stars, and I try to mix it up. I want to have a little bit of everything, some sports stars, some, musicians, some, women of color, men that have done great things. I want to make sure that, mental health is something that affects all of us. So it's not just, just actors, you know what I mean? Like I wanted to make that very clear, like, cause I could call my actor friends and be like, oh, hey, come on my show, come on the show.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to sort of try to branch out as much as I possibly can. So I'm really trying to really implement as many people as possible into the fold of the podcast.
It's an awesome show. And I know that just to get into your soap stuff a little bit, the Bold and Beautiful is celebrating 34 years on the air, and there are some actors on the show now who were not born when the show began. Were you born when the show began?
Well, I'm 41 years old, so that would say, yeah.
Okay, I guess so. So yeah.
Thank you, though. I appreciate that.
Sure. No, I'm math is not my forte. But do you have memories of that time? I think you came on right when Ridge and Brooke were getting married, and there was a lot going on. And what are your memories of those early days?
Well, the memories go way back for me because my mom was an avid watcher. She watched Bold and Beautiful and Young and the Restless. CBS was her lineup. She watched them all from the start to the finish. I guess, first of all, my memory is, well, some of my first memories were just, the whole process of just, kind of pinching myself going like, what is going on? I had multiple callbacks. The next thing they're like, well, we want you to sing a song with Adrian France, and we want you to be shirtless in that scene too while you're singing. And I was like, what's going on? But one of my fondest memories was probably like 2 weeks in, and maybe Michael, you covered the story. I don't know, but it was my first ever interview, what it was, and it might have been you. Very well could have been.
Only if it was good.
Well, it was definitely good. And I remember seeing a photo that was released in one of the magazines, and John McCook, of course, that was, he's always the hub, everybody just goes right to John's room, and we'd always hang out, and we would just, back in those days before like cigarettes were really, bad or anything, we'd go in there and have a smoke with John and hang out. And I showed him this photo. I said, I can't believe I'm in this magazine. He laughed at me. He like had this chuckle that was somewhere down deep. And he said, babe, this is just the beginning.
Yeah.
And it wasn't for many years later that I realized, what that meant to me or where I was going. It was so brand new. My intentions were never, I was never supposed to be a soap star or even go into TV. That was not what I was trying to do. I was going to go to business school, and I was accepted to UCLA and UC Santa Barbara, and I had a partial scholarship, and I was planning on, becoming a business guy of some sort. Now, flash forward, I've had a really nice run in TV and film. Never expected that to happen, but now I've been able to, without the formal education, I've been able to put the business deals together still. So I don't know what that means, right? I mean, do you go to college? You're not going to college to work for everybody? I don't know, but
Right.
for me, it worked. It was fine, and I was lucky to be able to be a part of Bold and Beautiful, and super happy about their anniversary as well.
Absolutely. And, you've kind of had these like three legendary figures. I mean, not just actually six with your parents, John McCook, Catherine Kelly Lang, and then you went to General Hospital with Anthony Geary and Jeannie Francis. And can you talk about that experience? I'm sure there were a lot of eyes on you at the time, taking over from Jonathan, who had had a great run in the part, and ABC. The serials are they're all the same, but they're also all very different. Like being on ABC is different than being on Bold and Beautiful versus being on other shows. You know what I mean?
And being on different shows, to show, they're completely different productions. Even though they are ABC
Right.
or CBS, they all sort of resonate in a different way. The one thing I can say, and I've talked about this story and I've been sort of open about it. And because Jeannie Francis, Tony Geary, I love those two. I've been, they've been friends of mine now for a long time. But when Jonathan left the first time and he was pursuing his career, there was a lot of talk at that time that they didn't want, meaning Jeannie and Tony collectively, didn't want the character replaced.
Right.
And it was a very bitter pill for them to swallow, because they saw this young lad, and become this young man, and Emmy nominations and Emmy wins, and they just didn't want to see the replacement. Wendy Rich, who was producing the show at the time, reached out to me and she asked if I'd like to potentially audition for the role. And she goes, I'm going to tell you right now, this isn't going to be easy, because Tony wants to have a say-so, in who's being cast. And I said, that's fine. And they had, I mean, this went out to everybody. At that time, there was probably 15 guys that were screen testing, or kind of various weeks that had gone in. I mean, I was in with Greg Vaughn. Greg Vaughn and I were screen testing for Lucky at the same time.
Wow.
Back in those days, lots of guys, lots of people that you would know, familiar faces. And it was oddly enough, the very night before I was going into the screen test, I ran into Ian Buchanan and Susan Flannery. I was walking down Franklin Boulevard, just, near Beverly, the Beechwood Canyon area, all that.
Oh yeah.
And I ran into Susan. She's like, Jacob, what are you doing? And Ian's like, Jacob, it's so nice to see. But, we were just having this like little conversation, like, what are you up to? And I was like, well, as a matter of fact, I'm screen testing tomorrow for General Hospital. And she's like, well, who are you going out for? And I said, Lucky, Spencer, and potentially playing, Tony Geary son, Lucky, Luke and Laura's son. And she goes, oh my God, I love Tony so much. You have to tell him I said hello. And I said, sure, I'll tell him. So with that being said, it was a very odd experience, because I go up to set and all the guys like Greg Vaughn and like the other collective Lucky guys who were all wanting to have that role. We're all watching the monitor. The monitor was still running. You know how this works, right, Michael? There's the,
right.
The monitor is live. Well, they didn't realize it was live. They didn't realize it until I was up, but I was the first one to go up. And I had heard from this kid who became a friend of mine afterwards, and he said, so-and-so, and I'm not going to say any names, but he goes, so-and-so said it was like a bad episode of Bold and the Beautiful watching you up there, which, whatever. You take that with a grain of salt because all these actors are, everybody's competitive. It's competitive business. But I do the scene up there. And Tony, we were talking right after, and I said, hey, Susan Flannery says hello. She wanted me to tell you hello. He goes, oh, Susan? I said, yeah, I worked with her on Bold and Beautiful. And she's directed me in a lot of episodes of Bold and Beautiful as well. And she's just become a good friend. And well, unbeknownst to me, later that night, he called Susan. And he asked Susan about me. And she goes, oh my God, I would hire him in a heartbeat. So my Bold and the Beautiful family supported me on my way into General Hospital, which was an amazing thing. And she's, I love Susan. She's just, she's a pull no punches kind of gal, and she doesn't take any SHIT, if you know what I mean. And so with that being said, I get hired, right? And now I'm working with Tony kind of exclusively, and Connie Towers, right? It was sort of that whole storyline, the mind,
You played chess with her.
Yeah, I played chess with her. Like, I had to learn how to play chess. Thinking of that, I was watching that, the Queen's Gambit, which I love that show.
Yep.
Such a good show. And I was like, oh man, I remember having to remember all those moves and things and talking about that. So with that being said, I hadn't worked with Jeannie yet, and she hadn't agreed to work with me. Apparently there was some, she was still really, holding on to the idea that Jonathan was going to be coming back at that point. And so we get to set, and I'm like a nervous wreck. I've got like a 3-page monologue. It's so long, and I've been rehearsing, and I'm like spot on with this. But she doesn't want anything to do with me because she's, she loved Jonathan, and everybody loved Jonathan. I can't be Jonathan. Jacob, I was doing my thing. And but she wouldn't make eye contact with me, which made me really insecure. And, and again, we're friends to this day. This is how we became friends, though. And she just didn't want to have him replaced, and I get it. And I made a mistake about 2.5 pages into that monologue. And it was the end of the world. And Tony was like, pull together, Jeannie. And they got in an argument, and, he grabbed me and he goes, hey, sometimes mom and dad fight. And I was like, oh, I get it. People have differences and disagreements, and I can use that. That's good stuff. So without going into too many details, because she's a really classy lady and I love her to death, and Tony too. And it was just, I get it. They were partial to Jonathan. He had been a part of their lives from, birth.
Yeah, he was a little kid when they started. That is a funny icebreaker. That I can just hear Tony saying that, because it's such an
he saw me get, like, I literally started. I gotta be honest. I actually started, like, I was welling up because I was so nervous.
Right. I would be.
And that's when he grabbed me by the collar, and he grabbed me and he said, hey, sometimes mom and dad fight. And I've taken that with me ever since. I get it.
And that's the show where you won your Emmy, correct?
Yeah, obviously there was a lot to do with the character, the writing. Of course, General Hospital is a great, it's always been a greatly, for the most part, great written show. And I won the Emmy for Lucky Spencer. They said it was never possible, and I did it. And
that's nice.
I would have stayed on the show too, but there were so many production changes that were happening simultaneously, and it was a choice I needed to make at that point in my career.
Well, an exciting choice, because you got to go to New York City, and it's a city where I've only visited a couple of times for work. And every time I'm there, I think, God, I would love to live here for a year or so, just to really experience it all. What was it like changing coasts, and did you find much of a difference in terms of the production on a New York show?
Another great question. Yes. I didn't know really, outside of maybe a couple actors that were working out there at the time, I really didn't know anybody. And it was really at a time in my life that I needed a big change. I just came off of General Hospital. I just shot the movie The Girl Next Door.
Mm.
And I was sort of just kind of like, I gotta tell you, I was kind of pissing off a little bit on the, acting stuff. I was living in Manhattan Beach. I was surfing. I was playing volleyball. I wasn't taking it probably as seriously as I probably should have. But Julie Carruthers, of course, she had been working on Port Charles, and that had just gotten canceled. And she had gotten the call that they wanted her to come over to All My Children. So she had always kept me in mind because she knew how much Wendy Rich had loved me as playing Lucky. And so she said, hey, let's take a meeting. I want to give you something to talk about and just think on it a little bit. And she said, I'm moving to All My Children, and I'd like to give you the opportunity to play Michael Knight's son or David Canary's son. It's your choice. And unbeknownst to me at that time, I didn't know that Justin Bruning had already been promised that he was going to play David Canary's son. So he was already cast as JR. But I was like, of course, because my mom watched the lineup, she watched every ABC show, and I was very familiar with, of course, Adam Chandler. In fact, it wasn't even until I probably got cast that I didn't realize that it was actually being played by the same person, Stuart and Adam. I don't know why I never put that together. I just thought that was two different guys,
Why he's got all those Emmys.
It was, yeah. So I was like, oh, I would, if I do this, I'd like to be Adam Chandler's son, JR, let me, and so anyway, I take that chance and I just moved to New York. And I told her, I said, look, if I move to New York, I want to make sure that I have the opportunity potentially to be on Broadway if I can, and I audition, and if it actually comes up and happens. And she's like, yeah, no problem, right? She was such a huge advocate for me, I got to say. And that show in particular, now I'm not talking about production-wise or any of that stuff. That show was probably the best place I'd ever worked in my life. I've had some pretty cool stuff, but that show was just a great team of people. The actors, the producers, it was just such an embedded New York show. And the thing, when you're asking me about what's the difference, when you're an actor and you live in New York City, it's kind of a big deal. If you're an actor and you live in Los Angeles, it's kind of like you're just another number. You're just a person. But to have a job and live and thrive in New York City, that was cool. In fact, so cool. And I'll tell you this story, and it's not because I wouldn't want to pay or do it, but I could show up at a restaurant every night of the week, different restaurants, and they just want to pay my way. Like, I'm like, wow, really? No. Let me tip your guys. Let me take it. They're like, no, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It's on us this time. Don't worry about it. It's okay. Just a really wonderful experience. And I would never not want to have that in my life. That memory.
What was it like when you were, because you did get on Broadway with Beauty and the Beast, correct?
As Lumiere.
And so what was it like taping during the day, then getting out by 4 or 5 or whenever they could get you out? How far away was the theater, and how much adrenaline kicked in? I would think that would be such an exhilarating time.
Yeah, great. Yeah, another great question. So it's funny because when I ended up booking, and I don't know if Julie Carruthers actually knew that was something that was really actually going to happen because I was really actively pursuing it. It came together. So she was like, oh, wow. Okay. It's here. So what had happened was, I was probably doing 3 or 4 episodes a week. And at that point, back in the days, we used to shoot 1 episode a day. And then it's sort of like they started cramming all these episodes together, and they were shooting up to 8 episodes in 4 days. So all of a sudden, those 3, 4 episodes went to 8 episodes in 4 days because I was working on Broadway. So they wanted to maximize on it. Oddly enough, guys, let me just tell you this. This is something, I can't understand as a producer myself, why different departments don't talk to each other, because Disney is ABC and ABC is Disney. They're all the same company,
right?
But they just somehow, there's a big disconnect. And when it did come together, and I got to give a lot of credit to my best friend, Mark Rosano, who was the managing producer of Beauty and the Beast, and we are producing partners to this very day because of it. He was able to bring those two departments together, ABC, Disney. And the Tom Schumacher, who is Disney on Broadway, he was, he's Lion King, the animation, all of it. That's all Tom Schumacher. I remember Mark calling me and said, Tom's going to take a chance on you. After I'd auditioned 3 times, okay, I'd gone in for, readings, rehearsals, this, that. They said, okay, yeah, you're going to get hired, but Tom still is not 100% on board, but he's going to give you a chance. The next day when it hit the breakdowns and went on Broadway World and Broadway.com and all those, it was something like 6,000 press releases across the nation went out. And Tom was like, whoa, who is this guy?
Yeah.
And, it was probably the most amazing experience. And oh yeah, you said, how is that? Well, it was really hard because I was doing 8 episodes. They would get me in the morning. I would shoot 60 pages of dialogue. Then I would go to the theater where they had a cot. I was a six floor walk up to the Lunt Fontaine. It was a 6-floor walk up. It wasn't a far place. It was a far way. It's probably 20, 30 blocks, but they had a car service that would pick me up, which was really nice. And I'd be dropped off at the theater. I'd sleep for about 2 or 3 hours. I'd put my own makeup on. My wardrobe guy would come in because I had butane packs and gas lines that ran my hands that had to light up on cue. And so I couldn't get into the costume by myself. And once I was in, I was zipped up from the back. So it was when the first time I got put in, I looked at everybody and I said, you know what? I don't think I could do this. And they're like, oh, you're going to be fine. You're going to be great. I was like, yeah. Do you see my feet? They're huge. They had this big candelabra, golden, huge boots that were sitting on my feet too. It was, but night after night, it just got better and better and better. And it took the Disney's Beauty and the Beast on Broadway from at the point when I was brought on, I think they were somewhere about 20th ranked on Broadway, and they went to like number 6, and that hadn't happened for almost 10 years. So there was it was a lot of good press. It was a lot of great experience, and they did well, and I did well, and I had a great time doing it.
Well, in the vein of be our guest, I'm going to ask my colleagues and fellow attendees here if they have any questions for you.
Please.
Diane, do you have a question for Jacob?
I do. I was wondering what it was like working with Katie Mclean.
Oh, Katie, Katie and I are still great friends. We still always laugh about the idea that, she's only probably, 8 years older than me. And she was playing my mom. But she's wonderful. She's so talented, and she's got she's got a tough, fighting spirit. And I respect that because when I first started in the industry, there wasn't that same sort, women were still not on that same playing field that we're still trying to thrive for today, like giving women the same opportunity. And she was always that woman that was like, we can do it. Let's make it work. And she's amazing. I have nothing but respect for Katie.
Awesome. That's great. Thanks.
That's awesome. And Shadow, did you have a question?
I actually do. I have a couple of questions. I'm a big fan of yours, and I have a couple of things. First of all, I see that you have a really nice guitar behind you, and I've been following your music. So my question is, well, actually, I have several. So
well, fire away.
Sit down and sit a while. First of all, how many musical instruments do you play? When did you start playing? And what is the latest song that you've got out that we need to know about right now?
Okay. So I started playing harmonica at the age of about 4 years old. We didn't have a radio in my dad's old 64 Chevy, and Dad would play the harmonica, and his dad played the harmonica, my granddad. So that was sort of my prelude into music. I would, Dad would say, hey, why don't you try it? And I'd blow on the harp. And I still play the harmonica to this day. I play guitar, I play drums. And of course my voice is one of my instruments. It's, you know, some of it's pretty good, some of it's all right, but I never claim to be a big, you know, singer. I just enjoy music. It's been a huge passion of mine, and it was never about really becoming famous because of it or anything like that. It was just, I just wanted to do it. But yeah, but thank you for that. And I've got several songs actually that haven't even ever been released that are still kicking around. And, you know, I've kind of went back and forth, and, you know, I've got a really great producer out of Nashville, Tennessee that I work with a lot. And, you know, we've talked about some stuff because there's a lot of things that I'm, you know, working on this podcast, and, you know, there's other stuff I wish I could talk about right now. I'm going to be on a Disney Plus show that's coming out on, in
Well, I
May.
think we do need to talk about that because I have children, and if it's Disney Plus, it's all about kids.
Well, unfortunately, I can't talk about it, but just know that there's something that's coming out, and you'll be seeing that coming out, and it's a really cool thing. And I got another thing that's coming out too. It's getting ready actually to head to go shoot a big award-winning show, and I just booked a major guest star role, so I'm very happy about that. Stuff that I've been wanting to do. So again, about the music, yeah, I continue. I play every day. My wife always laughs at me. She's like, and she doesn't laugh at me. She actually tells her mom, she'll tell everybody, she's like, it's Jacob's therapy. And it is. Music is my therapy. If I'm going through a hard day, or I'm having a really frustrating day, or it's a great day, I just sit down and strum the guitar, and it sort of whittles away at all those worries.
That is so cool. So I wanted to know, okay, before I let you go and someone else ask you a question, how did you get into country music and that versus another genre?
Yeah, no, I mean, I like all music, but country music, I grew up on a cattle ranch up in Washington State. I grew up on a pulled Hereford ranch. So if you know what that is, they're brown and white cows without the bull horns. That's why they're called pulled Herefords. They came originally in from England years ago because the Longhorns weren't surviving through the cold winters. And so they needed to breed those cows. I'm sorry, I was an FFA guy too. So they had to breed those cows with Longhorns in order for them to survive, so we could have a thriving, you know, amount of herds that were around the country. So my brother and I, you know, we grew up on horses. We grew up, you know, I'd wake up in the morning, have to go feed the cows and take care of the horses, amongst many other things. And when, you know, Dad was at work, we had all these cattle chutes and things, and we started trying to get on the animals. You know, we would, so the bulls, you know, so rodeo sort of became this sort of secret behind the secret. And my brother and I would do it on the weekends, and I made some money at doing it. And country life was always that life. And so the lyrics and the things that I've written over the years have always leans itself to country music. So that's how that came together. And my podcast is not generally supposed to be necessarily focused towards country music. I just happen to have a lot of friends in country music that, and that like to, I mean, they're open to talking about what's going on in their lives. So that's sort of how it came together. I hope that it sort of answers that. It was a good question.
No, I love it. I love it. It's just, I love learning and understanding where you came from and how you got, you know, and I like your lyrics are awesome. I mean, I love your music. So I was just wondering how it all came together. And
that's it. That's basically, I mean, in a nutshell, it was just the way of life and growing up that way. And working on dairy farms, I used to milk cows. I mean, not like by hand, but with machines. And I did a little bit of all of that as a kid. And, you know, it's just, I guess, you know, you kind of grow up around it. And I was always ashamed of it. Actually, when I was a kid, I was like, oh, you know, they're not going to think I'm cool because I like country music. I remember thinking that. And it wasn't until I was a lot older and I realized, you know, I just want to be me. And, you know, every time I write lyrics, it just came out as country music. And so that's how it happened.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
I can ask a question.
Yeah.
Hi, I was curious. So with coronavirus right now, I know a lot of us can't travel, but when traveling becomes a thing again, where is the one place you're most looking forward to going? And even if you haven't been there before, and then the second part is, where is your favorite place that you have been?
Well, when things do open back up, good question. When things do open back up, I definitely want to be traveling, and I know my wife does too. We want to definitely get out there, and having 3 kids too, and in school at this point, and my kids are virtually learning. My 2 that are old enough to take school. My son is 12 and preteen. So that's so traveling right now, obviously with COVID and that is a little bit difficult. But honestly, I've fallen in love with so many places. What I love the most, and I want to take my wife there. She hasn't been there, but I want to take her to Spain. Spain is probably one of my favorite countries that I've visited. Now, I've only probably visited about a handful of European countries and a little bit of this and that here and there, but Spain is right up there, and I would be more than happy to go back there. The second part of the question, what was it? You said,
I guess I asked, where is your favorite place you've been? And then where do you plan on traveling next?
Well, and then, and that might be one of those places, but my favorite place, who doesn't, I've been lucky enough with Bold and Beautiful twice now to go to Monaco and Monte Carlo. Those places are, it's kind of another world though. It's like another planet, it's, you're surrounded by sports cars and fancy this and that. So it's, I guess, in a lot of ways, I think of Monaco as a soap opera, right? Because soap operas are a fantasy, right? We get lost in the storylines, we get lost in the luxury of it. And that's what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be an escapism. And, going to a place like that is an escapism. I was particularly fond of when I went to Helsinki, Finland, when I was up there about, several years ago with Bold and Beautiful. That was, I knew nothing about Finland. And I knew nothing specifically about Helsinki, but I was really, really surprised by not only the people, but the cuisine. It was just a really neat place to visit. And I would definitely recommend it for anybody if they have the opportunity. There's so many great European cities, but that city was particularly, it was eye-opening for me. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks.
Anybody else got any questions? I'm dying to know, hopefully, the answers that I might have.
I have a lot, but I'll let everyone else ask them.
Pam,
That's all right.
can we get Pam to ask her?
Sure.
Nadia? Was she
Pam.
next?
Pam, let's get.
Oh, Pam. Oh, yeah. Here you go, Pam. I'm asking you to unmute.
Yeah, it sounds as though you've achieved a lot of your goals professionally and are in the process of realizing some of your dreams, daytime soaps, Broadway, the podcast, which I just listened to. What's it? The first one, Cowboy Troy.
Oh yeah. Today, that was the one that was released yesterday. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was cool. So I guess what I'm wondering is, because you've accomplished so much, where do you see yourself in 10 years? Are there unrealized goals, unrealized dreams that you would like to pursue that you've not yet pursued?
Yeah, absolutely. There's several things. I don't really want a lot anymore. I don't feel like I need a lot anymore. But my great grandfather told me something a long time ago. He goes, you stop wanting, you stop living. And so there's always some desire to want something in life. And producing has been that hat for me. With the Prepare for Launch film, I have another film that's I'm producing called Chosen. I was just on a Zoom call with the Utah Film Commission Board today. Just being creatively behind stuff that I'm passionate about, and being able to, even if it's not my story or taking somebody's story and somehow completing their vision, it's really rewarding. And I think the next, decades of my life, or as long as I'm around, that's what I want. I want to be able to tell stories, and not necessarily have to act in them or be a part of that. I want to see somebody's vision go, I love this, and I'd love for you to be in it. And I'd love to see you, spread that message, whatever that message is. It's like, for instance, this project Chosen that just got released on Actors Access, that's where actors find it all over the world. My buddy Trent Garrett, you guys might know who Trent is. He was Andy Mack's dad and Andy Mack on Disney. And of course, he was on All My Children. So this was when Trent and I started talking years ago. He would come to my house and he would go, "Hey, buddy, I've never really done much of these acting things." He's like, can you coach me? Can you work with me on this stuff? And of course, now he's got a great career. He's over in Prague right now working on Hannah and Carnival Row, Amazon Prime. Like he's just kicking butt. But he reached out to me and he said, "Man, let's do something. Let's put something together." And I said, "Well, I'm only going to do it if it's something you want to do, and you're going to be the star of it." And so I'm getting to tell his story and follow his passion. So that's really where the next phase of my life is giving everybody else the opportunity to live their dreams.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Nadia next.
Hi, Jacob. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. Nadia, how you doing?
Good. Great to meet you. I have a question for you. So, if you were to do a duet with anyone, because you're a country singer, who would you like to do a duet with?
Oh yeah. Well, there's several people. Well, Cody Jinks right here. I mean, this is one of my friends, and we were actually, it's funny. He was a hero long before he knew he was my hero, and now we are on we're texting each other every other day. That would be pretty cool. I've always been partial to Alison Krauss. I think she's probably one of the most beautiful voices in country music, period. And or Dolly Parton. Any one of those two would be like absolute dream come true, slam dunk, game over, never again I need to ever ask a favor of God. But those two come to mind, and I'd be more than pleased. I know they're older than, as far as I could say Taylor Swift, or I could say these people, right. But those are the people that I always are on my mind. It's a different generation. Country music is just not quite the same. Yes, we have a lot of good country music that's out there still, I don't want to get myself caught up into words, but I'm a fan of a different sound of country music, and I'm a big fan and advocate of the red dirt country sound out of Texas. They're sort of Brent Cobb, he's from Georgia, but he's also a buddy of mine, and his stuff is really smooth and jazzy, and he's just really cool. So like any of those people, I'd love to be working with them at any level.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, thank you.
And you're great. I love your music. So.
Oh, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you. You too.
That was a great question, Nadia. You're welcome. Nancy, I think you also had a question. I love your backdrop of the bridge.
Nancy is always with us, so she's still working on her backdrop.
Hi, Nancy.
Hi, Jacob.
How are you?
How are you, hon?
I'm good. Thank you.
Do you expect to do another Lifetime movie?
Yeah, I'm never counting myself out of doing any Lifetime stuff. In fact, my casting director buddy, who has probably hired me on all those Lifetime movies, Paul Ruddy, he's the one casting this Chosen project that I'm producing right now, which is a suspense thriller. It's definitely in that Lifetime genre, and I'll be playing a role of Sheriff Howie. So I'm kind of the guy trying to solve all the mishaps that are going on around the town. It's a sort of it's a psychedelic, weird thriller, but it's cool. I think you guys will all dig it. It's fun. And I got Trent, I got Michael Nouri.
Oh,
I got David Steen. You know who Bobby Eakes is, right?
Yep,
Bobby Eakes. Her husband's David Steen. He's one of my dear, dear friends. And of course, he's in every Tarantino film. So he's on there, and it's just going to be a really, really cool little film. So hopefully you'll like that one, Nancy.
oh, good. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I think we also had a question from Sandra, aka San Willie. I love that name. I've been meaning to tell you on your Zoom handle. Why don't you unmute yourself and ask Jacob your question?
Hello, Jacob. I'm a big fan of you.
Well, hello, San.
Hello.
It sounds like a really cool name.
Mrs. Willie. Chilling somewhere down the road. I was going to say, do you keep contact with any daytime alums?
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, I keep in touch with lots of folks. I was just talking to Missy Claire Egan the other day, and Chriselle Staus, and gosh, you know, those all the leading ladies. You know, Alexa, still keep in touch with. I haven't been in touch with Kelly Ripa yet, but I just did a All My Children thing that's coming out on E Entertainment. It's an anniversary special, and it's with Cameron Matheson, myself, Rebecca Buttig, and Eva LaRue. So a nice group of us together. And obviously there's been all this talk about Pine Valley's revival coming back to ABC. You know, I know they're focusing on those families, but they're also, you know, it's going to be a younger generation. But I would imagine I will be, you know, making my way into a couple of those episodes. You know, I was looking at IMDb the other day, and I didn't realize I did 897 episodes of that show. And I looked at it and I saw like how they rank it on IMDb, and I was the seventh, I don't know what it is, but I'm like the sixth most ever like episodes on that show. I was like, what? I don't remember doing all those shows, but it's great. And you know, it's, again, that was a great family. Bold and Beautiful, of course, I did almost just same amount of episodes. My IMDb, I looked that up recently too, and it was almost 800 and some episodes as well. So it's been, or I've been a part of, or in some form. So it's pretty incredible. And I go, wow, I'm not that old, right? I shouldn't be that old.
Well, you'll always be young, Jacob Young.
Oh, thank you, Michael. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. Listen, I think we've covered so much, and I want to thank you so much for coming on and giving up your time today, and also for your support of Soap Hub on social media. And we will continue to chart the path of your future projects, and we really look forward to having you on again sometime in the future.
Well, thank you, Michael. And of course, you know, I'm a huge fan of you, and you've always been there from day one. And I just want to put that out there. Everybody who's watching, Michael Maloney, he's AA plus, and he's always been so good to me and to all the soap fans that are out there.
Much appreciated. And the feeling is mutual. Back at you. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Well, you guys have a great evening, and enjoy it.